All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the session. I'm Ethan Lieber here, the CEO of Lateral, here with our co-founder and COO, Will Gordon. At Lateral, of course, we handle 24/7 maintenance coordination for property managers, so you can focus on more important things like growing your business.
Yeah. When Ethan and I first started Lateral, we were looking to take my grandfather's property portfolio and turn it into a very tech-enabled property management business. We saw a huge opportunity to just focus on maintenance. So that's why we started just Lateral, to be 100% focused on maintenance coordination. We saw how much work it takes to take a property management company, get it off the ground. There's just so many different challenges you have. And that's why we're here with Deb, a property management consultant. She runs a property management company of her own and consults others on the best ways to grow. So welcome to the show, Deb.
Thanks. Hi, guys.
Yeah. So before we dive in, if anyone tuning in has questions for Deb, please hit the ask question button below, and we'll get to those right after the session.
Awesome. Deb, I'd love to start with a quick intro about you. Would love to learn a little bit more about your background, how you even got into property management. What were you doing before that? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I always tell people I got into property management because of stupidity. It wasn't like something I set out to do. I just kind of fell into it, buying my own properties. Really, with the reason why I started buying my own properties and building my own rental portfolio was to get out of debt. That was like my number one reason. And I started buying them as fix and flips. And so I would partner with somebody and we would buy the property and then I would do all the work, which is kind of why I fell in love with maintenance from the very beginning, because I started right away doing all of the maintenance, tearing down walls, putting up walls, toilets, everything, you name it. And so that's really how it kind of built from there. Then after doing some fix and flips, I started holding on to some portfolios and some duplexes mostly, and then building my rental portfolio that way. The reason, how real-time leasing, the management company, started was as I was holding on to the rental properties. I can even remember my very first one and the address, but as I was holding on to them, I intuitively knew that I didn't want my tenants to know who I was. I didn't want them to know that I was the owner, because I didn't want to worry about that personal relationship of, if they didn't have their rent and I still had a mortgage to pay. So I created the company really as a facade and kind of hid behind the company, even though it was just me. It was only me that was the company for in the very beginning. And as I continue to build the portfolio and buy more properties, really it was, you're at the closing table and people are like, oh, are the realtors like, I have another real estate agent that has an investor. Would you consider managing for them? And I was like, sure, it can't be that difficult. So I really just built it organically without any intention to be a large firm at all. And then after about 50 properties, I hired my first employee, who still is my employee today and actually runs the company for me, so I can concentrate on other ventures. I started my maintenance company in 2009. And then I started the consulting firm in 2010, and then has really focused on consulting the last couple of years.
How did you get started into consulting? Was it just people asking you? And
a lot of it. I think I made that leap because my life before property management and before real estate was I did teaching. I was at the University of Colorado and I taught some poli-sci courses, and I really enjoyed the education piece. And I focused on also building my own knowledge outside of, my college degree, right? I built learning Six Sigma and EOS and kind of other things that would help me as a business owner, and then working with others. And it really just, again, it kind of grew organically as well, but sharing my knowledge and expertise in a different way and just teaching others on. And what I've learned in doing consulting is there's not a right way or a wrong way that people are running property management companies. Everybody does it differently, and that's okay. But you have to figure out how to help them run their company that suits their culture and their needs and what their goals are, really. So what is their end goal? And some people want to grow to 1,000 doors or 1,500 doors, but do they have the capacity to do that? And then helping them along the way and breaking everything down in phases and putting that into a roadmap, almost like a Gantt chart, and make it, and then phase everything out so that they're not overwhelmed. I think the biggest problem is that people get really overwhelmed pretty quickly on wanting to do everything at once. You go to a conference, you go to a trade show, and you see you guys are there, you see your competitors are there, and there's 3 or 4 different property management software companies. It's like you get overwhelmed, and then you're going to sessions and listening to speakers, and their information and knowledge is great. And so a lot of times people start a project. I call it a project, but maybe they start down the path of signing up with somebody and start that project and don't either finish it or don't know how, or just don't have the bandwidth to do it. They don't have the support back at their home office, or they're just not built in a sense to be able to execute. In addition, with they're visionary, they're not really the integrator of the whole project.
It sounds like you're a business coach, but with a focus on property management, because all those things that you're describing are just general business needs. I need to have a vision. How do I turn that into reality?
Exactly. But what sets me apart, I think, from coaches that are out there that I think do a really good job is that I go into your business and I actually help you implement this. And I think you guys know that as well. Where if I'm going to either give somebody a referral or if I'm going to help them set up a system, I'm actually doing it for them. I'm helping them also learn how to read their, P&L, look for revenue streams, but I'm helping them implement all of that stuff in there. Because the challenge with sometimes when you listen to a coach, which are great, they sometimes just don't know how to get from that point to this point. The coach is here and they just need help. And that's not, and that's where I kind of call myself the fixer. I just go in and I kind of help fix that situation and put the pieces together, make sure they're running, and then,
Yeah, so not just have your client figure out how to move the ball forward, but you actually move the ball forward for people too.
Yes,
that's an amazing service.
Yeah.
Is there a typical customer profile that you have, when you're working or consulting with a company? Is there some mold that those companies fit?
Not really. It's interesting because I do both single family and multifamily. So I have multifamily clients as well, and they have very different needs than single family. And then in single family, my smallest client had 85 doors and my largest is, almost 7,000. So we're all over the map on where people fall. And again, it's just based off their structure and their needs. Everybody at some point needs a reevaluation of their business to make sure, and to kind of, do you have a business plan, and what is it in 1 year, 3 years, and in 5 years? And to make sure that we're following down that path and not missing anything that you want in that plan to go forward. Some people want growth, like I said. Some people don't want growth, but they want efficiency. And they want to step out and completely and never take an email and never set foot in the office or anything. So if they're looking for just efficiency, that's a whole different plan that we have to set up. So
with clients with such diverse needs, I'd love you to walk us through your process. How do you identify the pain points and the goals for the consulting engagement?
There's a couple different ways I do it. The most effective way is if I go on site. So I do have this unique ability to go on site and assess people pretty easily, discern not just their personality, but really their personality at work, and watch them and observe how they're doing business. And I'm not talking about the business owner. I'm actually talking about their entire team, and going in and talking to their team, because I know the business, I know the questions to ask. So I'm trying to figure out how they're doing processes every single day, going through that entire life cycle of property management. Tell me how you onboard a property, tell me how you market a property. How do you run an application? And I'm looking for, consistency, or what tools they're using. So some may be using software, some may be using workflow automation tools, and really trying to see if everybody's on the same page. What usually happens is what the business owner thinks is happening and what the employee is doing are not the same thing. Although they sort of are trying to speak the same language, but it's a lot of times the business owner has said, okay, I need you to do this. Can you figure it out? And so the employee has taken it and done what they can. But at the same time, sometimes they don't have the resources to know all the opportunities of, different tools out there for them to use. And so that's where I come in and ask questions, tell me why you're doing it this way, and have you thought about it doing it this way?
What are the most common things you see that, like, right off the bat, you'd have a pretty good idea of these are probably some areas to look for improving? Are there any like common ones that you see all the time?
Well, I tell people there's 3 basic things to focus on for a company. It's people, process, and technology, because you need all 3, especially in this day and age. You definitely need the technology. Although I've had clients do things on pen and paper before. And so getting them into the, but checklists are okay, or writing everything down may be okay, but at the same time, it's not going to move the company forward when your competitors are pretty much going to eat your lunch if they're doing the technology that's out there. So I think to answer your question, it really comes down to the people. We need employees. We need them to run the company. And how are they set up and how efficient are they? Sometimes they're not in the right seat, in the right bus, and we have to move people around, or we have to exit people. And I've helped do that before, or I've helped hire people and bring in that piece of it. So build that foundation, and then look at the processes, and then look at, your policies, your procedures, your, how your process flows. The continuation of how that business is going, and then looking at the technology that you're using to run it. On average, I have calculated that there's about between 7 and 8 different systems that people, a property management company will use on a regular basis. If that could be anything from your phone system to workflow automation to Latchel to, a Rently or a tenant turner or something else that brings, your call center for anything. So all of those things we need to help run the business, and whether that's employees in-house or we're utilizing third-party, vendors to help drive efficiency.
How do you help a company decide like which way to go on these different things? For example, do we do it in-house? Do we use a third party? What type of software do we use? Is there like a layer you're using to help define which way a company should go?
It's really just, again, observing how they're doing it now. So, and really feeling out what their needs are, what their wants are. Again, this goes back to the company. Some people want that phone answered live every single time. You will find people who want that, and that's okay. But will that work? So depending on the size of the company, it could, or it may not. And so we have to look at other options, and then introducing options for them, and helping them evaluate the cost of it. Does that fit into their budget? And working that. So a lot of it is talking through a whole bunch of different ideas, what they're comfortable with. Because remember, I'm going to help implement it, but in the end, they have to run with it. So I don't want, it's like nobody wants to put a bad tenant in a property, because we have to manage that tenant, right? So in the end, we really don't want to put just a warm body in a property. The people that do that are usually self-managed, homeowners that are just trying to get their mortgage paid. As property managers, we actually do care about our business, and we're trying to make sure that, if we're managing 200 or 400 properties, that could be, 400 or 800 tenants, because there's usually 2 tenants per property. So we know that managing tenants can be difficult. So we want to do that. It's the same thing with your business. I don't want to help you implement a system you're never going to use. I don't want you to waste money. I want you to use the product and be happy with it.
Are there like common mistakes that you see when you go in that you have to work to fix? What are those?
I think the biggest mistake I find is that people, employers will use, the business owners will use employees to plug a problem. Does that make sense? Like put a Band-Aid on a problem. Like their solution is, I just need another body then to do that whole piece of the pie, right? That whole process. And that's usually not the case. A lot of times, the I always say, I never like to hear an employee say, I'm overwhelmed, or, oh, it's just, I have so much to do, I can't do it all. Well, then either we have to break down then their roles and their responsibilities and see if they're truly managing too much or too much on their plate, or are they not being efficient? So the number one complaint usually is centered around people. On, employers want to make their people happy, which is great, and I think they should, but at the same time, how much capacity can that person manage? It may be, again, just a bad fit, or it may be where we have to just drive efficiency in a different manner and change our processes. A lot of times there's a lot of gaps in the communication between processes and between people. Some people are not talking to, they either rely too heavily on the software or not enough.
What does each one look like? Like relying too heavily on a software versus relying not enough? Like how does somebody try to thread that needle?
Well, so it depends again on how a business is set up. But if you think about marketing a property, for example, who's marketing the property? What are the so we break all that down. How do you market a property today? Where do you market it? Do you do that strictly in the software? And then when you push the button to go live, does everybody in the office know? Like, is there some sort of an email that goes out? How do you guys communicate with the team to say, hey, 123 Main Street is now on Zillow and everywhere else and on our website? So how do you let that team know? And how do you let the leasing agent or the do you set up in Tenant Turner to be self-managed, or, or self-shown or something like that? So what are you doing to make sure that all of the check marks are done and that you're communicating with the next, person in charge of that area? So if it's one, the smaller the company, it's a little bit easier because that person is usually wearing many hats. But as you grow a company, at some point you have to bring in more people. How do we communicate? Sometimes it is through workflow automation, and so they're relying heavily on a Podio or a HubSpot or something, or like an Asana, and they're relying heavily on that, and not at the same, and still not communicating. They're not holding weekly meetings. They're not. Some people have daily huddles. Some people do weekly meetings. Some people only do once a month meetings. What's more efficient? I work with some companies who don't have a brick and mortar office, and they only come in once a week or once a month at like a WeWork space to work together. And everybody then they work remotely. For some, that's really effective. A lot of people don't find that very effective. So again, it's strategizing with the homeowner, or not the homeowner, but the business owner, but also, where's that business located? So if you have rural Pennsylvania versus a big city in Atlanta, you're going to have two different types of businesses.
Yeah, when you're talking about all that communication steps that are necessary, I think it's really easy for business owners to miss that, and to think, if I'm going to implement this technology, everything's going to work because this technology, say, handles marketing for me, or marketing these emails.
Yes.
You mentioned Six Sigma earlier. One thing that we do inside of Latchel is we use a methodology with processes. It's fairly straightforward. It's just ripped from Six Sigma. I think it's called a SIPOC. But every process has inputs. Every process has outputs. Every input is supplied by somebody. Every single output is consumed. There's a customer. Yes. And we just map out for every single process what comes in, what goes out, whatever goes out, who actually needs to get that information. And do we have a system in place to ensure that the inputs are coming in, the outputs are actually coming out?
Deb, you opened a can of worms as soon as you said Six Sigma.
Yeah.
And not very many people know about it, so it's fine. So yeah, you're going through and you're defining, you're measuring, you're analyzing, you're going through that whole process, right? And you have to do that with every single, and I look at the whole life cycle of property management, and there's all these little steps that you have to take care of. Because if you think about it, even within the application process, there's a whole bunch of steps that we have to make sure who's touching it and where, again, a company may have a lot of VAs that are managing the whole application piece, but once they're done, where's that, how is that getting communicated? And the input, the output, all of that.
Yeah, it's all about communication flows. So do you have any other tools that you use as you're thinking about a business beyond just communication working, or is that like the magic piece that you try to work across the entire business?
Well, I guess what do you mean by tools? You mean like
when you're thinking about solving the problems for your business,
okay.
meeting those goals, like what other ways are you viewing the problems? You have people, process, and technology, communication.
Yeah, I mean,
what else?
I'm looking at it as finding the root cause of the problem. So everybody, the reason why they've hired me is probably because there's some pain point in the business. And what I find is that what they think the pain point is, and digging deeper, is not always the root. There's a root cause to what's going on, and figuring out what that is. We may have to back up. They may want to go, I need you to fix this, but I have to look at the whole process and say, but I actually I have to fix this first before I can get to this. Because if I just, if I fix one piece of it, it's like, the best way I can describe it is like if you have software, you guys know this, software with API, right? So if I fix something, a functionality in software, guaranteed there's going to be a glitch somewhere else in the system because I didn't think through the entire process. I just focused on one problem. And sometimes when you fix a functionality that's not working in software, inevitably it breaks something else, right? And so that's what you have, and that happens when you're using API and you have all this open, shared systems. And so you have to be careful that if you're trying to fix one thing, and it could be a person, maybe the problem really isn't the person. It could be the trainer. How did you train that person? And so it's, digging deeper. It is through talking, communication, but it's, I have this whole intake process when I'm taking on a client and I'm asking for certain things and they go, well, why do you need that? Because I'm looking at the whole business at a 30,000 foot level, and I have to, and from there I can pretty quickly discern what, if what you're thinking is wrong is what is wrong, and then seeing how it's all, it all piles in together. It's all a big puzzle.
A question like I get a lot actually when I'm talking with our customers, and even not customers. But the question I always get is, a lot of times owners of property management companies, they don't even know how to benchmark their performance.
Right.
Like they don't even know, like, am I doing well in this or not well? Like, one of the questions I get all the time is, how many people should I expect to have for a number of units? Like, so that's the one I get all the time.
Right. I think that's the infamous question that's out there for everybody. And again, this goes back to what I said in the beginning. It depends on how you run your company and how big your company is and how you're structured. So I don't think there is a magic number to say you have 150 properties, you need 3 people. Now, if you have 150 properties and have 6 people, it pretty much will probably tell you have too many people. But at the same time, initially, that might be my gut reaction. But then I discover, well, 2 of those are just sales, like completely not part of property management. 2 of them are maintenance, not part of property management. And then 2 are in property management. Well, then that's different. So, but at this, because you have revenue coming in from sales, I hopefully have revenue coming in from maintenance, and I have revenue coming in from property management. So now I'm looking at probably 3 different P&Ls. And how are we, and again, so how is it structured? So you can't have a knee-jerk reaction to say, oh my gosh, you have too many people, because they may have it structured so very, very differently. But you're right about the benchmarking, because that's another thing that I do, is I help them benchmark their competitors. That's one tool that I do use. And when benchmarking their competitors, we're looking at revenue streams, software applications, all of that, to see where they where they fall in to their competitors in their market. And that's one piece of it. I'm also looking at, I call it this organizational calendar. So regardless of what month it is, it could be January, it could be June, July, right? During the month, you always have these certain milestones as a company that you need to hit. For example, rent's due on the 1st. Maybe it's due on the 2nd, maybe it's due on the 3rd, maybe it's due on the 5th, depends on the company. And then what do you do the day after rent is due? You start calling. Dialing for dollars is what I call it, right? Jerry Lewis telephone. Right. So we're picking up the phone, we're calling people, and we're saying, where's your rent? So there's all these processes. No matter what month it is, there's certain things that you do in 4 departments: accounting, marketing, property management, and maintenance. And within those departments, you're going to have little subsets, right? But if you break it down to 4 main departments, some companies marketing will be part of property management. But the idea to break it out into those 4 arenas is to understand which milestones those areas each have, so that when you're looking at this calendar, this monthly calendar, you're like, oh my gosh, it's the 6th. I should have a report generated to me that tells me all of my delinquencies. And maybe again on the 14th before I file an eviction. And at the end of the month, I should be looking at all my open work orders. So this is where KPIs come in, right? So then we start looking at what KPIs are you tracking, because that's another important thing. So I'm kind of a report geek. I love reports. I think a company is well driven with really good reporting. You don't need a lot, but you need really good, accurate reporting. Sometimes you need them weekly and sometimes you need them monthly. So there's like top 10, I have a top 10 reports that I have on my website that I tell people, these are the things that I think you should be looking at as far as reports go for your business every single month.
So building those key performance indicators, I imagine a lot of your clients maybe have very few when they start, and by the time that they're done with you, they have a lot. Mm-hmm. What's the fastest way somebody listening could get an important KPI in track? Like, what software should they use? What do they probably use already that they could use more of?
Well, so each property management software does have reports built in. Appfolio, Buildium, Propertyware, Yardi, they all have reporting. It's just, what are you measuring and making sure, what's important to your business. Again, this goes with your goals. On my website, so you can go to either the long version of realtimeconsultingservices.com or wefixyourbiz.com/tools. You will actually, there's a whole bunch of different tools that I offer people to look at on things that they should be measuring a lot. And I think he's like, are you typing it up right now? I could, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it too.
Oh, are you? Okay. So from there, it will, I talked about that operational calendar. I talked about KPIs. I talked about the 10 high, reports that I think should be pulled. So those are the things, again, these are just, exercises that I encourage clients to kind of get started with. With your software, you can set these reports up to be automatically generated to you. So, each software does it a little bit differently. So you'd have to kind of figure out how to and tweak it within the software. Some do it where you can measure custom fields that you've created. Others don't have that, but other, may have tags that you can pull reports off of. But it's looking at, your move-ins. Who's moving in the next 7 days? Who moved out 7 days ago? And then, your security deposit dispositions, making sure you're tracking that in a timely manner, because you don't want to miss that deadline. Again, that's going to be something you put as a milestone on your calendar, right? So making sure as a company, when you're really wanting to go figure out what you need to do to fix your company, it's really getting down to the basics. And that's really what these are. Is they're just, some people will go, well, that's just so, duh, I know that. But you'd be surprised how that gets missed.
They're probably saying, duh, I knew that, but why am I not doing it?
Maybe, hopefully, right. So, or a lot of people do start off that way, but then they get lost. Like just business gets busy, and that's great. Sometimes growth is not the hardest part for people. Growth is usually, if you really apply yourself, growth actually can happen. But when growth happens, what gets neglected? And that's all of this. Property management 101 gets neglected, all the basics.
Do you see like plateaus, like these common plateaus people hit, where either they hit a certain point in growth and now things start breaking in the operations side, or?
No, yes, there are definitely, I have this, I've given this, I don't know what you call it, a breakout session before on where people, again, it's when you're scaling your business, where those trigger points are really when you scale. For some people, it's like 150 properties. It's then maybe 400 properties, 400 to 500 properties. Then you see it again at 700 to 900 properties. There are these scales where you kind of hit this plateau and you're like, okay, I'm stagnant. I'm not moving. What needs to be ruffled and changed? And that's when you look at your business again. You have to look at your business again at a different in a different way and tweak it. Just like just like your HOA dues that change every year. So does all of software and business operations and things like that. We need to be looking at our business every single year at a minimum. If not quarterly is what I recommend. So when I do strategic planning with companies, I recommend, and I have this whole map of, and I think that is actually on that whole tool thing as well, is looking at your whole year and breaking it down by quarters and what you should be doing each quarter and each month. So it's not overwhelming, but we have to be looking at our business in such a way that we don't lose sight of what our goals are as well.
So we have a question about one specifically about projectmanager.com, but I'm curious, what tools do you recommend your clients put in place? Is it just a calendar invite to themselves and Google Calendar or whatever else it is to keep these routines in place? So
again, I think it will go back to that person and how maybe savvy they are with technology. Some people will build it into their workflow automation, which is great. So a lot of people, if they're using Asana, that's something that you can easily build in. Same with Podio, and same with HubSpot. So you can build those reminders in there, or set your calendar to block off time every quarter so that you can review the previous quarter. I think that's the biggest challenge, is finding the time, because it's the end of the month, and the end of Q2 is not always the best time to say, I'm going to take 3 days off and go to the cabin and, look at my business. It doesn't work. We say that, but it doesn't work for everybody. So it's what works for them. So if a calendar is what will work with an alarm, great. If it's an automated tool, something that will pop up, some sort of a reminder, there's all sorts of technology that allows them to do that.
Sounds like you match the tool to the person.
I do. That's part of the whole process. Again, it's making sure that the person, because Podio is not a super easy out of the box, or neither is Salesforce, right? So do we build something that works for them to grow with them, or do they need something a little bit simpler?
One of the things that I think has been helpful for us, Will and I, as business owners, has been bringing in the entire team into holding each other accountable, holding the company itself accountable for doing things that are big, like big strategic sessions, big important meetings, priorities meetings, and things like that. How involved do you get with the team when you're in a client engagement?
Well, I think it's very important to have the team involved on all levels. So especially when you are onboarding a new client and in your firm, everybody should know that you brought in a client, and you brought in a new property, or 2 properties, or 5 properties, right? We all, everyone from property management to leasing to marketing to accounting and to maintenance, because we don't want it to just all of a sudden show up in our software one day and go, surprise, So again, this is going back to the communication. What are we doing? Are we having level 10 meetings? Are we having, strategic planning sessions, and who's involved in those? So, again, depending on the size of the company, you could have your executive team, map everything out, and then you bring it to the entire company. Thinking of it like a board of directors. You have your executive board, and then you have your entire board of directors. It's things have to go in phases as well. And some people have stakeholders into their company, and so they can't really just make decisions without conferring with their stakeholders and making sure that everything is in line, and then rolling it out to the entire team. But with property management companies, generally they don't have all of those people in their way, so it may be a little bit easier to make changes, policy changes, and they can be quicker. But having the buy-in. Here's the other thing: if you don't have the buy-in of your entire team and you make a decision and change it, what if this goes back to what they're doing every day on a process and what you think they should be doing. So they might know it's not going to work. So who really drives the change? It really is from the bottom up, it shouldn't be from top down all the time. You should encourage those who are actually doing the work to bring forth the ideas. That's one way to also help them feel like they have ownership into the company and that they're valued as a company.
I'm kind of curious, like when you're working with or consulting with a property management company, let's say they're trying to get like over one of these plateaus that they've hit, and maybe you've never met them before, and you know they discover you maybe right now. So someone's listening in that's at a plateau, and they might contact you and say, "Hey, let's talk." When you work with them, what is that? How long is that engagement? Does it become like a permanent? Do you become like a permanent fixture there, consulting with them regularly, like every 6 months, or is it like really hyper focused, like 1 month and then you're gone? What does that look like?
So it's pretty hyper focused in a 2 to 3 month period. Sometimes it'll stretch out to 4. I have one client that I'm still working with, and it's been 10 maybe months. So it's again, size of company, strategic planning, what are we rolling out? So some projects are much bigger than others. Multifamily takes a little bit longer at times too, because there's things on a larger scale, and there's different sites that we have to work with. But with single family, it's usually hyper focused because we're obviously going in to fix an issue that's right away that's a problem, and we're fixing that, and then we're rolling it out, and then we're going to see how it works. Sometimes it will then tweak something else to maybe not work as efficiently, and then we have to go and fix that. So I do encourage clients who I've worked with to say, okay, let's check back in 6 months. Again, how is this working for you? How is so-and-so working for you? Maybe because we moved people around, or maybe we hired new people. What's the next phase? So we break it down in phases, and sometimes we only focus on phase 1, and we may take a break because of the busy time of year, and then we may go into phase 2.
I'm kind of curious, you might not be able to say names. If you can, would love to hear names, but do you have a few success stories you could share with us?
I will share one name because I think he would be okay with this. It's Deca Realty out of Missouri. His name is Steve. Oh my gosh, Young. I was just like, my mind just drew a blank. Steve Young. Yeah, I mean, I tend not to, unless my client wants me to share them, but I know Steve wouldn't mind. I've worked with GC Realty out of Chicago. I don't think Cliff would mind either that I just name dropped his name, and they have a very good company as well. And both are actually, I think Cliff's company is pushing 900. Steve's company is probably at 1,500 now doors. And Steve's problem in the beginning, when I first came on, and this was a couple of years ago, was he had a lot of people, and they were overlapping. Some people were overlapping and doing things that they, other people were doing, but because of that communication, they didn't really know that, oh, they were doing that. So again, it's kind of breaking down the whole roles and responsibilities and finding out, we kind of had to map out the entire structure of the their org chart entirely, look at the org chart, and then kind of go from there. And then it phased into other things. We, focused on property management, and then we focused on maintenance, and making that more efficient. A lot of times when I come in for maintenance, one of the biggest things is because their staff has become overwhelmed with, work orders have gotten away from them. They have, if you have a company of 200 and you have 300 open work orders, there's a problem. So how did that happen, and how do we fix that? And it's, who forgot to close again, it's whose step was it to close that loop on closing the work order? Was it the accounting person? Was it the maintenance coordinator? Like, who in somebody's mind is supposed to be doing it? And sometimes, again, they thought so-and-so was doing it, and that's not the case. And now I've got open work orders, and I'm hoping that when I see that, it's not because I've missed billing, right? I'd hate for that to happen, and I hate owners to lose money, or not owners, business owners to lose money.
Yeah.
They forgot to bill owners. And how would you like to, if you own rental properties and your property management company came to you 4 months after a work order was completed and said, oh, by the way, you owe us $500. So it comes into, again, driving that, getting that down, and what was that trigger point, and fixing it.
Yeah, and just you describing that, it totally makes sense why it's such a customized approach, business to business. In some businesses, it might make sense for it to be the accounting department that closes it. In others,
Yes.
It might be the maintenance department. In others, it might be the property management department. And it really becomes who should be responsible in this particular company.
And that's why I think, again, it goes back to, everybody's an expert. I understand that when, when it comes to their own business. And so they want to share their knowledge, but it's not going to work for everybody. And so that's where you really have to spend time into their business and understand how they are structured and what they want their culture to be like and what their expectation is. If their expectation is they only want 3 employees and they expect those 3 employees to do everything, then we need to figure out how many doors each employee can, maybe we structure it in a more portfolio fashion than a department fashion. And so at some point, the fastest way to grow a property management company is to really focus it with portfolio based, right? Everybody's taking on more roles. They're wearing more hats because they can do more, but they may not be able to handle as many properties. So you need more portfolio managers. But then if they're all, bringing in properties, you build a company pretty quickly. But after a while, that may not be the most efficient way. And you may have to change going now to a department style. And that's okay to do as well. Again, it depends on what your vision is for the entire company and where you want to be. If you want more, some people want more offices. They don't just want one office. Some people want to open another office. And if you're doing that, then we have to centralize things, right? And so now we're focusing on doing that.
I don't want to take too much more time because I do want to open up to any questions and leave that open. But I want to dig into a little bit of your change management process because you just described, you have portfollios. That's a great way to grow quickly. But then as you scale, I could imagine quality and consistency across portfolios might be an issue. And also
so you have to have a change agent. Yeah. So you have to have a change agent. You know this, right? So you have to have somebody that's going to, and it can't always be me because I'm not going to be living there forever type of thing. So I'm kind of the initial change agent, so to speak, but I'm training the person that's going to be driving this. And it's usually not the business owner. In fact, I don't really want it to be the business owner. I need the business owner to continue being innovative and forward thinking in their business. On what they want to do for their business and supporting their staff. But, I'm looking for somebody who is, that can become the director of operations, the general manager, the VP, or somebody like that, right? That can be that change agent that's managing all of those things that are going on.
That's I think that's excellent advice because if the owner getting bogged down in that, it also makes it even feel more like it's coming top down. Then it's not as organic of a process, and the owner has different things that they should be focusing on as a company.
Well, exactly. So they should be thinking of innovative ideas for promoting their business or going out and networking in a way that they want to do it, or not even going into the office at all, or what works.
For a company coming to you to engage in a consulting relationship, and maybe even if it might not even be the business owner coming to you, it might be the business owner just wanting to make a big change and designating someone else in their company to be that change agent. What are the things they should have prepared before even engaging to put you or someone else in their company that's a change agent on the right path?
Well, I think we need to, the structure of the company is a big one, right? So the organization of, the team in general, and making sure that that kind of structure is in place. It can change, but making sure their financials are in place and in order, because usually your change agent isn't going to be covering they're not covering the company financials. But at the same time, if they want to make changes or want to implement new things because they're trying to be innovative with ideas, we have to make sure that can be in line with what the budget is as well. So they need to, we need to have a budget. We need to kind of strategic plan with whoever that person would be on mapping out what their role would be, and having expectations that they have to report back into the business owner.
So before even starting, if somebody was wanted to engage with you on a consulting project now, is there any homework that you would want them to do beforehand, or would you be able to help them get those preconditions in place?
I pretty much help them with those things that they need, but I do have this intake checklist that I kind of give them, saying I want to look at your P&L, and I'm looking at it on a very different level of, I'm just looking at basic, I want to know what your income and your expenses. Because for the most part, expenses are going to be much more than your income, but I'm looking to see how they're generating their revenue from maintenance and from property management, and how that's all broken down. And then what expenses they have against those things. And that includes employees as well, and breaking it down even further on payroll taxes to bonuses that they may give, because that all hits that bottom line. And sometimes we give money away to employees thinking that will make them happy, and it really affects the profit of the company, the profitability. So we can't always just do that because we want to be nice. So we have to make sure that the money is there. Looking at their org chart, looking at all the roles and responsibilities, job descriptions, that's another big one, is making sure each employee has a job description and they understand what their role is. So, and job descriptions are important. Essentially, if you were to go out and hire somebody, they need to know really what is my core function. And it's a one page. It's not anything that's like, 5 pages long. It's a simple couple, bullet points on what their overall 30,000 foot view job description should be. The roles of what they do with that particular job, we define a little bit later. If they have any processes in place, I want to see them as they are today. And how are those in? A lot of people have them written down like in Word or in Google Doc, and that's okay. And if that's the way they want to keep it going, then we kind of revise that and look at the processes today. A lot of people don't ever touch they do it once and they never touch them again, or they don't do them at all. Policies and procedures, if they have any, making sure that we're looking at those policies and procedures for each of those processes. And that's where it gets really fine-tuned. A lot of people don't have that. But, I hate to use this analogy, but it's the best thing. If you get hit by a bus, what's going to happen? Are these, I get a lot of people who say everything's in my head, which is very common for a business owner or for their number one or number two in charge, right? If something happens, if we, you take a sick leave, something happens they're not in the office for a while, how do we get that information out of them? And how do we build that so that everybody's on the same page? That's the biggest thing, is making sure everything's written down somewhere. At the same thing, what it will do is it will also value the company a little bit better. So if they're looking to sell their business at some point down the road, their business will be of more value if they have processes in place. So I just increase their acquisition cost is by doing that. And it may not even match the person who's buying them, but the simple fact that they have everything in place, that new company may go, wow, I like how they're doing it this way. It's how they're valued. So if you don't have anything written down, nothing in place, and it's just, you're buying a book of business that could go away in 6 months because the owners are going to be fed up and mad. So if you have systems and all of these processes and procedures, owners are happy, they will stay, you get acquired, that company takes on this, they have also built-in processes. It drives efficiency. Owners like consistent, results, and that's what is going to keep the business going.
What's the best way for a property manager to get in touch with you so that they can see if it makes sense?
You can go to my website. So I realtimeconsultingservices.com or wefixyourbiz.com. You can schedule an appointment on my calendar, and we, first initial conference, consultation call there's no cost to it. Try to figure out what is going on. You can email me at dnewell@realtimeconsultingservices.com. If you want to call me directly, my cell phone might start blowing up, but you can text me on my cell or call me, and it's 612-669-4464.
I also want to add, before we jump into questions, for anyone that stayed this long, and if you listen to the podcast later and you stayed through the whole thing, you're in luck. We're giving a Deb special coupon code for anyone that wants to start with Lateral. That's just DEBRTC20. Deb RTC20. Use that coupon code and you get 20% off your first month. And if you meet with Deb, she'll actually get you even better pricing on Lateral because she gets special Deb pricing for her. I do get special Deb pricing. And that's this is what makes, I want to make sure my clients are taken care of. So that's where I become a value to them, is making, I'm connecting with vendors and making sure that the product fits the client's needs.
and you guys know this, I'm always heavily invested in my clients. And when I hear things, I'm literally calling you up. And that's really the advantage of why they go with me, is they know I know the people. I have the connections, and that's good, because then I can reach out, because I know you guys care, but you guys can't always know what's going on. And things happen. And I always say that software is not perfect either. No software is. There's glitches, things break. Humans aren't perfect. Things happen, but can we fix it and move on and get past that and make everybody happy?
Awesome. Let's open it up to questions. So feel free to, I guess there's a ask a question button. Click the ask a question button. I actually have one I've stored up.
Okay.
So if we don't have anyone post anything in the next few seconds here, I'm going to ask the first one.
Okay.
And actually, I'm just going to ask it because I'm sure everyone else is thinking this too. I think being a business owner, you always hit a point where it might be the most difficult problem you've run into. It might be you hit that plateau, but you always, I think as a business owner, at some point hit this point of questioning, am I even doing the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
Am I even on the right track here? Have you ever hit that point in either of your businesses? And what was it? How'd you get around it?
Is this now therapy?
This is I just want someone to commiserate with now, actually.
Oh, yes. No, I think everybody hits that plateau. Everybody does. And yes, I have as well. So, but that's where I have learned to probably take, it's that whole, before you send that email, wait 5 minutes type of thing. Before you send an email, it's the same thing in business. You just have to kind of take a step back and breathe and look at it from a different angle. And honestly, you're going to laugh, but what I do is I tend to sleep on things, because when I go to sleep, I feel like my brain resets. And so the next morning, either I go, well, that wasn't a big deal, or I just, I actually, one of my employees actually kind of taught me that. She has taught me that over the years, if I just pause long enough to not react, right? That's the biggest thing, is to not react immediately, that knee-jerk reaction, pause long enough, then we can look at it at a fresh angle. And I do know now, there's two sides to every story. There's always, there's probably a reason why somebody did something, or why I'm hitting this plateau and why I can't move past it. So, and that's where I reach out to my network of friends and people I know. That also helps. It's, again, kind of that therapy of talking to them and asking them for their advice on, how do I approach this? I'll say I'm not the best marketer in the world, but I have really a good team of people that I trust and that I can go, here's my idea, but I don't know how to make it happen.
Are there networks that you would suggest people join to get that idea sharing?
So I'm part of a whole bunch of different networks. I do a couple different masterminds. NARPM, I know that's been spoken about before. That's a very big community of property managers that commiserate. And so there's a lot of Facebook groups online for those. And then I belong, I know Brian and Jonathan mentioned this last week as well, because I'd listened to them, but I do go to IRM, and I go to IMN and NAR and 5 Star. So I actually hit a lot of conferences because I'm hitting a lot of different people. But I'm also, I do part of the masterminds I belong to are not NARPM based, but they're focusing on the real estate industry. And so I'm hitting different, I'm just learning different views. I'm always constantly wanting to learn. I read a lot. I love audibles. So I'm listening to a lot of books and trying to gather a lot of ideas. And that's how I just build on things and tweak things. And I'm continually improving my, process as well.
So I know we actually touched on Brian and Jonathan's question, but I'm going to just go back to it a little bit more explicitly, because Will had kind of breezed over it.
Got it.
They asked if you know anything about projectmanager.com. It's a cloud-based project management software. I don't know if you know that one. how would you rate that one? Are there other?
I do know of others. I think I'm guessing they're talking about maintenance for being project man. I'm assuming it's going to be maintenance based. There are others. There's one called WorkWave is one. Help Desk. I know other people use. And I've worked with clients that have used both of those. I haven't heard of this one that they've mentioned though.
Do you suggest WorkWave and Help Desk?
I do. I mean, again, it depends on the client. I have clients that use both.
Okay.
And I have clients that use the exact. So here's another number one thing I get when it comes to maintenance. So, and I can go on this would be a whole nother webinar on this, but with maintenance, just focusing just on maintenance and how that whole operation works. I firmly believe if you're not getting paid for doing maintenance, you're doing it. I mean, something's wrong, because maintenance is not property management. It is a entirely separate business. Whether it's a division or a different company, there's a lot that goes on with coordinating, facilitating, project managing the whole job, whether it's a single work order with one item, or it's a turnover, or if it's a renovation. We just, we're not going to do this for free. And that we can become the experts for the owner in our area by, utilizing the right tools, but, also dictating whether or not we're dictating prices to our vendors. Are we, having standardized pricing? Have we developed that? Like, there are all these different things that we can do to build that piece of the business to generate its own profit.
So would that be, do you mean like hiring maintenance techs internally?
Yeah.
To make profit there?
So having an internal team versus an external team versus a hybrid, right? So you're going to have some companies who are going to have third-party vendors for maybe HVAC, plumbing, and electrical, right? So your big I always call it your big license things, right? And then you're going to have maybe some in-house technicians, like your general handyman, right? So the stuff that they can do pretty much on a daily basis, and then a majority of the make-readies.
Is there like a method or a couple methods that you commonly recommend for making that a profit center, like upcharge or just increase your monthly rate?
I love maintenance. I do. I love maintenance. I think it's fun. I think there's a lot of money in it, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's different ways. So you can charge a maintenance facilitation fee. So maybe that's the easiest thing, right? Maybe you charge something for every single work order you generate.
Just like a flat fee.
Yeah, like a flat fee. Some people do it on $1, some people do it a percentage. Then you go into, maybe you charge a percentage like 10% or 20% on every single work order, regardless of what it is. And that's, and I do also believe in disclosing all of this in your management agreement too. So you need to disclose what you're doing so that the owner doesn't feel like they're being had, right? That it's one more fee. And the other thing, it's an easy conversation with an owner when they're like, well, you're just, you guys are doing this so you can get all the business. And really it's, you're free to do your own maintenance, but that means you're going to coordinate the vendor with a tenant. Like, we're stepping out. I'm not going to be liable for, Uncle Joe, who is not licensed to go in and who also may have a rap sheet the length of my arm, and I don't know it. And so we have to, as a company, we have to have protections in place. So it's all about risk as well. And so it becomes an easy conversation, and we're also trying, we're control freaks, property managers, like we're type A. This is why we started this business. We're entrepreneurs. So we're going into this because we really want to control the entire operation from start to finish. And that is how, if we, are doing it right, it works.
I do want to be conscious of time. We're coming up to the top of the hour. I think we could definitely dive in deeper on any one of these topics, and we should think about scheduling a follow-up conversation. Ethan, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. Deb, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll definitely have to schedule a follow-up for more questions. And again, for anyone listening, if you're interested in checking out real-time consulting services, you can head to, what were those 2 links that you want people to head to, Deb?
Yeah. So you can go realtimeconsultingservices.com or wefixyourbiz.com. And if you go /tools, then you can, we talked a little bit in the beginning, in the middle of the podcast about consults. Yeah.
And we're going to take those links too, and we'll put them in the notes.
Sure.
So you can just click there. If you're interested in learning more about Latchel's services and what we do, click the green button below to learn more, schedule a meeting with us, or go to latchel.com. Not next week. We're taking next week off, July 4th. Happy Independence Day, everybody. Have a good time at your barbecues or whatever you have planned for the day. But we will be talking to actually Latchel's VP of Growth next, Josh Hirsch, who comes from Agentology, to give us a little bit of insight on how to increase your lead gen and growth at your company. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. And Deb, again, thank you so much.
Thanks. All right. Bye.
All right. See ya.